The Town of Light is currently free from Prime Gaming until the 26th of February 2025. Normally, I'd say what genre of game this is, but it doesn't really fit in any. It's more of an interactive story that unfolds as you move through the world of an asylum in the 1940s in Italy. And the story's pretty rough. The game's 18 plus, and it isn't going to be for everyone, even those old enough to play. In fact, I don't think it's going to be for the majority of people. Now, I won't be directly referencing events in the game, but the whole purpose of the game is to present a story about abuse, serious mental health issues, and the inhumane treatment of people with mental health issues in the 1940s. So if that's not something you want to watch, please jump off the review now. The experience is presented in a variety of different graphical styles. As you wander around the dark, abandoned asylum, the graphics are pretty good, they're decent, and they do give you a slightly creepy vibe. You are very limited in your interactions. You got simple controls of movement, no jumping allowed, and you can turn your torch on. Outside of that, you can click some objects in the environment. There are medical reports, letters and other documents that you can read, and some of them appear to be sourced from true events, I think. I've not looked into it too much, to be honest. I do know that the asylum itself is a real asylum that existed in the 1940s. There's other objects that you can click on, but they only provide you with a 3D model of that object that you can move around a little bit. I don't know why. They don't affect the gameplay or the story in any way. I guess it's just so we can see what an old-fashioned phone looks like a little bit closer up. The documents are written in Italian, but they provide a translation for you, obviously. Or, sometimes if they're important plot points, they'll be read out. Some documents will trigger cutscene memories. These scenes are in very different styles. They can be just black and white, sort of 3D rendered. They can be line drawings or more cartoon-like animations to fit whichever emotional beat that the story requires at the time. This range of artistic expression is a plus point. They work well even when they are often quite harrowing, or maybe that's why they work. Scenes or voice dialogue can also be triggered when you enter certain areas. These are the way the story unfolds. There's no real puzzles to solve at all, or gameplay elements to engage with beyond walking around and interacting with stuff. You follow the prompts that the dialogue and cutscenes give you to open up more of the story. There are a few specific dialogue parts where you are prompted to choose from different options, effectively acting as a voice in the main character Renee's head, answering some questions that Renee has. I don't know how your choices actually affect things, but I do know there are 3 possible endings that are determined by these choices. You can restart the game at any chapter you've already completed, so if you want to get all of the achievements, of which there's quite a few, you can jump back into any chapter at any time. Some of these achievements definitely need multiple playthroughs of specific chapters. In addition, there are collectibles, which are entries in Renee's diary that further fill out the context of a story and how Renee was affected by her mental health issues. It's clear that the Town of Light is intended to be a way to tell the story of conditions in an asylum in 1940s Italy, and the developers chose to present that in a game rather than a novel or a film. I don't have any issues with the concept. Immersing yourself in an interactive experience can make you feel more involved in the story and make it more impactful. Unfortunately, that didn't really happen for me with the Town of Light. This could partly be my fault, in that I didn't always know where the game wanted me to go or do, which meant I spent a bit too long aimlessly walking back and forth through the empty corridors. I completed the game in around 3.5 hours, whereas various playthroughs on YouTube are only 2 hours. That did include me using the guide to help me move on just once. I'm not sure I'd have figured it out without the guide otherwise. I don't know if that's like me just not picking up enough on the hint, or maybe the hint being a bit too vague. What wasn't my problem was the amount of slow walking that is required. I really wanted a run key quite a lot of the time. When you know where you need to go and you have to walk there at a crawl, it feels like the game's wasting your time a little bit. Especially when there isn't actually any gameplay as such to occupy me between story beats. In addition, even with the choices that you can make, I didn't really feel like I had any say in the direction the story took. Let's talk about the story a little bit. I won't be putting in any spoilers. The character Renee talks about being abused as a child. What I'm not sure about is whether she had mental health issues before the abuse, or if they started because of the abuse. As a consequence of her mental health issues though, she's committed to the asylum where she suffered further abuse from men, as well as the terrible treatments that patients had inflicted upon them at that time. We do see events from Renee's point of view, which is obviously somewhat clouded, which does give you insight into how people can be affected by trauma and mental health issues, but is also somewhat hard to determine how that's affecting her because you don't actually know the full story at the time. What does come across is the shame and guilt she feels due to her abuse, which might give some people a bit more insight. It's a very sad, uncomfortable experience watching it unfold. Many of the cutscenes depict very abusive situations, with the final cutscene being brutal and I think maybe unnecessarily so. But the impact of these scenes are undermined a bit by the fact that people are no longer treated in this way. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to learn from following the story. What is it trying to tell me, beyond the facts of what used to happen? It doesn't tie into modern life. It's not a commentary on modern views or modern treatment of mental illness. So it feels a little unmoored. Beyond the sympathy I feel for all of the girls and young women that the game depicts going through what amounts to torture, the only real takeaway for me is that the asylums in the 1940s were a terrible place, whose function was less to treat patients and more to hide them away, which, I'll be honest, is something I already knew and doesn't really impact my life, which surely is the point of telling these kind of stories. I don't think that's a reason to not recommend the game, of course. Just because I didn't really take anything from it doesn't mean no one else will. It's not really a fun experience, and I guess it's not supposed to be. But for me, being presented in the form of a game took away from the impact of that story, and that's why I won't be recommending The Town of Light. The game elements weren't enjoyable. It felt like I was trudging from point to point to uncover the next bleak scene with no real need for interaction, which slowed the storytelling down, which I feel was the main purpose of this piece of art. Even those people willing to hear this story probably won't enjoy the way it's presented in this gamified format that doesn't have a game. It's a unique piece of art, it just didn't work for me. Okay, that's enough from me on this one. I'm off. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.